So for the Terno project, I entitled my work "mOda" or "Oda Kay ni Marites." And later on, I will further expound why I used Marites as my main muse for this particular project. As an introduction to myself, I am a graduate of BS Architecture from UP Diliman. I graduated in 2006. I'm a licensed architect and I have been practicing for the past 16 years. 2 years of those 16 years I spent in Singapore, and then I returned here in the Philippines, and I've been practicing architecture with my family in our architectural firm, JFRA Design Enterprises, with a focus on commercial and residential design. And I took up fashion design last 2016, and I graduated from the Fashion Institute of the Philippines, Ortigas 2019. I am the owner and designer of the clothing brand Wilkin, championing the use of local handwoven textiles, slow production, and custom-made pieces. I have a keen interest in local textiles and reinterpreting traditional silhouettes into modern wearable garments. And currently, I'm a senior architect for our firm, and I'm also accepting custom-made clothing. So I'm trying to balance both architecture and fashion design. All right, for this project, just to give you a bit of a context why how this came about. So last 2021, I was very intent in joining this very prestigious design competition that focuses on the Philippine Terno. And along the process, I was already in the application process, and I was really, this is one of my dream competitions to join. It would have been the first competition actually if I pursued it, if I pursued my application. But in 2022, during the application process, I learned that most of the sponsors, mentors, proprietors of the competition are cronies of the current administration and the Marcoses, and they are known apologist supporters. So I decided not to pursue my long-time desire to join the competition. And later on, during that year, when our current president won the presidency, it further established that I further established in myself that I don't want to join the competition anymore. So after that, I questioned myself, now what? Because there was this a hodgepodge of different emotions inside of me. So there's a mix of anger, exhaustion, disbelief, frustration, and lots of disappointment. So the challenge to myself was, anong gagawin mo ngayon? What am I going to do now? So also personal reasons, some of the personal reasons were my mother was red tagged and illegally detained in 1979 when she was a student in UP, and she was just 19 years old. So the realization kicked in that I don't want to take part in a competition that that would applaud people who are the cause of that unfortunate incident during my mother's life. So there was a desire in me to find a creative means to show dissent using the terno, which the Marcos family is co-opting back to their image building and propaganda. And there's also the desire to disassociate the terno from the imildific image. They're using it again for propaganda. So what did I do after that? The actions taken were simple conversations with friends with similar values and political leanings. So technically, you might call it chismis because we were just conversing and we were talking about ideas, how to go about these emotions that we were feeling collectively. So in conceptualizing the output, we wanted to conceptualize an output to vent out all the building emotions. And in that conversation, I was able to talk to my fellow residents right now, Cheska and Renz. And Cheska being having a project as well with Jego, she spoke to me about the ongoing UP Open University projects. So this became like an opening for that particular desire to showcase this the desire to have an output for our emotions. Okay, inspirations and drivers. First and foremost, the piece that I will be creating is inspired really by disinformation. The insidious proliferation of large-scale disinformation campaigns that resulted to the outcome of the 2022 elections, and how disinformation, historical revisionism, dementia, or whatever you want to call it, relating to the distortion of facts and truths, change the world and people's perceptions. how these campaigns, mostly brought about by algorithms in our social media ecosystem, has impacted personal relationships, changed established views of world events, past and present, and has catapulted political figures back into power. And how propaganda machineries are back at work in dismantling democracies, and how all of us are susceptible in being drawn into this web. So the initial concept, it was very technical because I wanted to use algorithmic language to somehow manipulate clothing and show it in real time how algorithms can change silhouettes, the terno or any type of clothing being the canvas for real time manipulation of reality and identity. So I chose to use the Philippine terno as the vessel for this thesis, as it represents our identity as Filipinos in the context of fashion and how it is being co-opted back now by the people in power. So relating it also to architecture, much like how brutalist architecture was used during the martial law days as propaganda to show power through the built environment. The terno was also used by the then First Lady in her vision of propaganda by using fashion vis-a-vis beauty to cover up the atrocities of the regime. So because that initial concept was very technical, and of course we are pressed for time and also resources, the next iteration for this, I wanted to find a way to still represent this information, but not really using algorithmic languages, because I, for one, I'm not very well versed yet about computer programming, and it would take some time for that particular concept to be fully realized. So, with that in mind, I was talking to Cheska, and she has a friend that had a commissioned album made by Imelda during that time that used propaganda songs, commissioned propaganda songs. So I thought to myself, this could be a representation of that distortion of facts. So using a propaganda song entitled Pag-ibig ang Guro, written by then First Lady Imelda Marcos and arranged by Magdangal de Leon, together with selected projected collage images, mix of time-lapse videos of flowers and other images, as a representation of disinformation and distortion of truths. And then the kinetic mechanism designed to make certain parts of the garment move, in this case the butterfly sleeve, will be set in motion by its interaction to the artificial light from the projected images, as well as sensitive to sound or music, which will be played in loop inside the installation. So the idea is to have like an interactive and immersive installation project that would really lure the participants or the audience in that particular booth, and parang it would show a reflection of how people would react to this particular propaganda machinery. For the armature and kinetic devices, I am currently in touch with a robotics specialist, Kaizen Robotics, for a possible meetup to further discuss the project. But we are also in touch with an in-house consultant with UPOU, so we're also collaborating with them. Okay, one of the inspirations as well for the garment is the caricature of Marites that is being proliferated now, that image of the chismosa kapitbahay. So just to show you one of the motivations as well for me that really stirred my anger are some of the competition guidelines of that particular design competition. So one of their guidelines, it says their participants are encouraged to be as original as possible. But in the same breath, in the same guidelines, they also say that use of profanities and politically incorrect images are strictly prohibited. But they did not define what political incorrectness is. So in my perception, they were trying to probably safeguard the people behind this particular competition. So the Marites caricature for me is, your typical neighborhood source of juicy gossip and false information, often clad in the duster, which is very familiar for every Filipino. So my assumption is, or my presumption, the image of Marites, she represents who who she represents encompasses all social strata, political leanings, educational background, family names, etc. All of us can be Marites. So in my particular piece, would also want to show our vulnerability because any one of us can be sources of disinformation as well. In searching for inspirations for the silhouette, I wanted to look back on the predecessors of the modern terno. So when I was researching on the silhouette of the garment, I was really drawn to the balintawak silhouette. The balintawak is the predecessor of the terno. Uh, it also evolved from the traje de mestiza, but it was commonly worn by the working class Filipinas during that time. So for me, this was a more accessible and democratic version of the terno. It's very pastoral and it's very practical. The common Filipina and the common working class Filipinas during that time actually wore these garments, however, however fragile they may be. So as you can see in some of the photos, the sleeves were rolled up, the skirts are wrapped around in whatever way the owner would want it to be worn. And it's climate responsive, light, ethereal. The purpose in all of its elements are adaptable to the wearer's job, probably. Um, in searching for the silhouette inspirations, I looked into various versions and predecessors of the Filipiniana terno. So yeah, so as you can see in this slide, this will be one part of the garment or the inspiration of one part of the garment that I will be creating. Then silhouette number two, because I wanted to bridge that democratic image of the terno with the common or the version of the terno that's being propagated right now, which is very formal and very, let's say, it's very formal and relegated to formal occasions. I wanted a certain type of silhouette that would bridge those two together. And that bridge to me was the duster because it's a very familiar, very common to all Filipinas. And I wanted also to incorporate this silhouette into the garment. So also the duster became synonymous with the Marites caricature or character. And my speculation is baka yung mga nasa Malacanang, people who are also in the higher positions in government, also wear this type of garment. So it's the common thread that binds all these silhouettes together. The duster as the quintessential pambahe wear of our moms, lolas, titas, etc. becomes the bridge of the two opposing silhouettes I want to incorporate. The duster silhouette also has similarities in cut. For example, the neckline, the Sabrina neckline, and the A-line symmetry that is similar to the modern Filipiniana terno. The speculation that this type of clothing style encompasses all social classes. The narrative and speculation that maybe those in power also have a duster lying around in their multi-million walk-in closets. And of course, the image of what a Filipiniana terno should be, that we are all aware of, is this particular type of silhouette, which was popularized by the then First Lady Imelda Marcos. So it evokes purity, very virginal, goddess-like imagery, and this was very prevalent during that time because these kinds of images by Imelda, where she was wearing this particular type of silhouette, it's very widespread during that time. And right now, people are when you say Filipiniana, this is the terno. This is the image that is conjured, and of course, right now it's being co-opted back by these people in power, and that there are certain rules that they want the terno, that they want designers to follow, for it to be called, like a real terno, and this is it, So just to show the relationship of the silhouettes. So the first silhouette which I mentioned earlier is, for me, one that depicts really our identity and the reality of who we are really as Filipinos. And then the commonality or the familiarity is embodied by the duster, the common duster. And of course, on the other side of the spectrum is the aspiration of what a Filipiniana terno should look like. Okay, for the materials and processes that I was thinking of, most of the materials will be coming from second-hand Filipiniana textiles or Filipiniana clothing from friends, from family, which I have already done. So I have a stock of um, donated clothing, which I will be turning into this particular garment. For the process, I would be using certain techniques that I did also before. And two of these photos show some of my works before, which I also used secondhand Filipiniana garments to create more wearable and more up-to-date clothing for our times now. So it's a mixture of patchwork, mixture of draping styles, but using secondhand Filipiniana fabrics. And some for the embellishments and for the styling of the clothing itself, I would be using and cutting some of the floral motifs from the common duster, and I will be using that as applique for the entire garment, just to further establish the familiarity of imagery. In fact, when I posted this image in my Instagram, a few of my friends privately messaged me and they told me that this particular duster uh, was is worn by their moms or their lolas, so they're very familiar with it. So I think that drives the point of the familiarity of this particular type of garment, because all of us are have a very share a common experience with the duster. So these are just some of the um, initial concepts that I have for the movement of the terno of the garment. So I wanted the main mechanism to be installed in the sleeve, one of the sleeves, and then it would, when it interacts with the light and the sound, of course the silhouette would change. And I am very much interested how the movement would interact with the other side of the garment, the push and pull effect of both sides. Um, Also, it's a metaphor for the collapse of the truths and the facts as it interacts with propaganda. In finalizing or in creating final design options for the final garment, I did two sketches, but I am more inclined into doing the one to your left. It is basically based on the duster silhouette. It's a two-piece garment. The undergarment is based on the duster's A-line silhouette, and then there's a camisa, a crop top camisa, which is commonly seen from the pre-war traje de mestizas or pre-war balintawak ternos in the past. So it's crop top in silhouette, and then there's an oversized sleeve. And then this oversized sleeve would be the one who would be interacting with the light and sound projection, and it will be the one creating the movement for the whole garment. And as you can see, there are two sides of the garment. It's an open front type garment, button down, because I also wanted it to be very wearable. Even after the installation or this project, I wanted it to be worn by probably a political figure. And then, yeah, on one side of the garment, you could see the patchwork. So those were the second-hand Filipiniana clothing will be used for that part. And for the other part, the more pristine one, that which represents the emulsific terno, I will be using dead stock fabric, using gazar fabric, which is typically used for these types of high-end terno garments. For the imagery, this is still under process, so I'm still finalizing what types of imagery will be projected onto the garments. And so I'm working with my multimedia artist brother, who is here right now in the Philippines, and we're trying to create abstract imagery that would be projected onto the clothing, which in turn would make the garment move. So one of the images that I was thinking of, or some of the images, are um, images of a flower blooming and wilting, and probably interjecting it with some editorial cartoons during the martial law era. And of course, some imagery of the image making or mythology, which was propagated then and is being rehashed right now. So the text or and the music that will be played for the installation is this one, which was written by Imelda Marcos. The title is Pag-ibig ng Guro. So the lyrics is shown right here. But what really bothers me was the description on the vinyl record. So the description says that here that it was composed by the First Lady on the occasion of President Marcos's 61st birthday, a natural utterance of an extraordinary, warm, and sincere soul who has pledged a lifetime of dedication to the service of her country and fellow men. This song abounds with inner beauty of thoughts and feelings which she embodies and continues to project in her every moment of existence. So obviously, this is a propaganda type of description. So I also wanted to interject the realities during the time when this was composed, which was in 1978. So just so I wanted to show the context of the country while this song was being written by the then First Lady. So in the final installation, I would probably choose. I would also research further on what events really transpired during that time that that is related to the martial law struggle. So the long term iteration for this piece that I wanted it to be installed. So it's an installation piece, but of course maybe the future phase of this project would I would have this fully realized during future phases of the project. So some of the inspirations for the installation are works by Louise Bourgeois, a French artist, enclosures for venerated artifacts which are commonly seen here in the Philippines, and works by Olafur Eliasson, who is known for using distortion and manipulating our senses to experience the works of art. So these are just some of the initial concepts of the installation that I wanted to create, which I will further expound on as this study progresses. But as a diagrammatical interpretation of the installation, since I wanted to be experiential, I wanted the viewers or the audience to fully see the garment head on and have this immersive experience in looking at the garment. So as the person confronts the piece, it will be boxed in a like an enclosure, like a enclosure for venerated objects. On both sides, it will be clad in frosted panels of polycarbonate, and on top will be a colored panel of acrylic, just so that the real colors are not really what it seems. I wanted it to be very abstract in a sense if you're viewing it from outside. But as you approach it, once you experience it head on, you can see the actual garment. And at the back of the installation of the garment or the mannequin, there will be a reflective material, probably a distorted mirror, so that you can see yourself with the garment draped onto your reflection. And of course, this will be further developed as this study progresses. So, how does it relate to the future? So, the future concepts that I want to questions that I want to throw out there is: can clothing be manipulated in real time based on algorithms? Algorithm responsive wearable technology or development of applications that can change clothing in the future using keywords or articles we often read, etc. Maybe we just need one responsive garment using fiber optic threads, which can respond to the silhouette we choose to wear. Can we actually show our dissent, creatively show our activism or advocacy through our everyday clothing? Can we disassociate the terno from the Marcosian image and co-opt its image back to its more practical and everyday use? If the competition's purpose is to really make the terno more democratic and make more accessible to the majority, then we should disassociate its image and silhouette from the select privileged few who are defining the terno as it should be. We should look back at the predecessors of the modern and melodic terno, and see typologies where it was used for everyday life then and manipulate its silhouette to the current zeitgeist. So that's the gist of what my proposal or the garment that I would be creating for this particular project. So thank you very much.